Hi, my name is Smriti Ashok. There's another Smriti here. That's Smriti Pramanik. Um, this is my fourth time mentoring with Magic, and I had the pleasure of working with Anya this time, who's an eighth grader at Rancho Middle School. Anya had some exposure to some coding concepts before we started, but she really picked up Python really quickly through the Code Academy Python course. She really wanted to learn a language that is ubiquitous and can be applied to many concepts. So we focused on Python. From there, she wanted to do a project that combined her interests in animation and art with computer science. She's very talented. She actually has a wall of all the artwork she's done in her room. So it's really great to see a project that combines her um, interests in a unique way. So we started off with doing a more Super Mario style project or game, but we had to switch to a more Flappy Bird style game as we ran into some issues with the library. But she was very quick and adaptable to change, which is a great skill. I had a blast working with Anya, and without further ado, here is Anya presenting her project.
Thank you, Smriti, for introducing me. Next slide, please. My mentor's name is Smriti Ashok, and she works at Siemens Energy, where she is a commercial sales manager. She currently lives in Houston, Texas, and some things that she likes to do are cooking, traveling, watching TV shows, such as The Crown on Netflix. My mentor also attended Rice University, and she has a bachelor's in chemical and biomolecular engineering. On the right, there is a picture of Smriti when she visited the San Francisco Botanical Gardens last year. Next slide, please. Moving on to information about my project. The name of my project is Winged Whimsical Run, and it is an arcade-style endless flyer video game. The reason why I selected this game as my project is because I was really interested in learning about how to game develop and connect code with visual graphics. My interest in game developing stemmed from my love for gaming and my intrigue in the way that it works. Next slide, please. Through this program, I have learned multiple things. Some of them include that I learned how to create pixel art through a site called pixelart.com. I learned how to use Python code video games from PyCharm, which is the development environment for Python. I learned how to libraries such as Python Arcade and Pygame, and most importantly, in my opinion, I learned how to use better problem-solving skills in order to create a good functioning game with clean code. The main objective of my game is my main character, whose name is Aliora, dodges fireballs that come at her while she collects coins. Next slide, please. Moving on to my experience with Magic. So one of my favorite things about this program was that I loved receiving mentoring and advice from Smriti because she was someone that's experienced and she helped me whenever I needed a second opinion or if I was running into any really major problems. It always helped to talk it out with someone else. Additionally, this experience has really given me the opportunity to learn how to program and to learn how to create an interactive, cool, and interesting game that I can be proud of. Some of my accomplishments include that I completed the Code Academy Python 3 course, and I learned how to use various softwares that aid in game development. However, with accomplishments come challenges. I ran into two major challenges throughout my whole program. My first major challenge was the bugs in my code and figuring out how to debug them. This was a really big problem because it was difficult to first of all find out what these problems even are in the first place because a lot of times error messages aren't that descriptive, and then it was difficult to find out how to effectively fix these issues. My second major challenge was finding the right working Python library for my game. As Smriti mentioned earlier in her introduction for me, I originally was using Python Arcade, but I ended up having to switch my game into a more Flappy Bird style instead of Super Mario. The reason for this was because when I was using Python Arcade, which is a Python library, its version wasn't connecting well and working well with the Python IDE that I was using. However, despite all of these challenges, my experience with Magic was overall really informative and fun, and I enjoyed it. Next slide, please. Moving on to what I bet most people are excited for, which is the demo of my game. So the two screenshots that depict code, the left screenshot and the one at the top right, are excerpts from my code that I used for my game. And by the way, these are both in PyCharm. So within my code, I use a lot of classes and I use a lot of functions in order to code certain elements of my game. For example, I used it to code like the enemy and the main character and the coins of the game. And then on the bottom right are three of my main sprites that I use. The one on the furthermost right is my main character, who the player controls, and her name is Aliora. The sprite in the middle is the obstacle that Aliora is trying to not hit, which is a magic fireball, and the sprite that's on the very left is the coin that Aliora collects while dodging the fireball. Next slide, please. And now this is my video demo.
In order to control In order to control Aliora, the player uses the arrow keys on their keyboard. The right and left arrow keys move Aliora forward and backwards. In contrast, the up and down arrow keys allow Aliora to fly up higher or fly down lower. As she collects coins, the score in the top left goes up by 100 points. There is no limit to the game and it never ends unless Aliora comes in contact with the fireball, which leads to the end of the game.
Next slide, please. And now on to what my plans for my game are in the future. Firstly, one of the first things I want to do with my game is that I want to incorporate a mixture of backgrounds so that way my game has variety in it and the player doesn't get bored with it. On a similar note, I would also like to add multiple levels that have different difficulties so that way the player is always challenged and finds the game more interactive and fun. After that, I would love to make my game playable on different devices so that way the player can choose whether to play on, say, a mobile device like their phone, or they can choose to play on their laptop. And then finally, I would love to publish my game as an official game on the App Store so that way more people can have access to it and they can try playing it. Next slide, please. Thank you, Smriti and everyone here for listening to my presentation. If anyone has any questions, you can ask me it.
All right. All right, let's start with our local questions. Any questions here on the floor? All right, we've got a quiet audience here. Let's try remotely. Any questions from our remote audience? Did you hear me?
Any questions, Katie?
I don't have a question on remote, but just a comment. That was such a fantastic presentation, very well explained. I guess I can't ask a question though, which is, did you have any ideas for other kinds of apps? Would you make more along this vein, or did you get inspired to take a different direction and make a different kind?
Are you asking like whether I had any ideas before this of different types of apps,
or while working on the app, if you had any other ideas come up or anything you want to work on in the future?
Honestly, I didn't have too many just because I already in the middle ended up having to change my whole app idea when Python Arcade stopped working and I had to get this whole different idea. Actually, in fact, originally it was going to be more like Super Mario in the sense that it was on the floor and it was even a pirate theme thing. Now my theme is fairy, so I already changed it like not too long ago, so I didn't have any ideas.
That makes sense, and kudos to you both for being able to get over that challenge and still